And let's speak first to the journalist and campaigner Adam Pearson. And Adam, you've been tweeting about this because you feel very strongly.
I do. And I want to start off by saying that this debate isn't about a woman's right to choose. I think that's always should be held precedent. My umbrage is with it's a lazy trope. It's a storyline that belongs very much in the 1970s and 1980s and does add to the stigma that is faced by people with Downs. They are essentially using the number of chromosomes someone has to determine whether or not their life is valid or important.
I suppose the show's defense is they're doing a version of reality, and that conversation and the decision, heartfelt, that the couple take in the program is reflected in real life.
Well, they're doing one version of reality. Another version of reality they could have done is have the pregnancy go to full term in the face of ignorance and prejudice and had the exact same conversations and have it not end in a termination. That, unfortunately, is not the way they went. They again have equated a diagnosis of Down syndrome and gone straight to termination.
And that is the thing that you find the most difficult to deal with?
I find the lack of balance difficult to deal with. There's the quotes in the Metro from the producer saying they consulted charities, plural, and they consulted people with lived experience. I called various Downs charities yesterday who were not consulted and spoke to parents of children with Down syndrome who were also not consulted. So I think that quote in the Metro from the series producer is an exaggeration of the truth.
It's worth saying, I suppose, Adam, that there is already a character in Emmerdale with Down syndrome, is there not?
Yes, there are, as I'm aware, two disabled characters in Emmerdale, one who does have Down syndrome. And that is what is being pointed to a lot in a bid to justify the storyline. But what message is that storyline sending to the audience? A lot of people with Down syndrome watch Emmerdale. What message is that sending them? A lot of families who have people with Down syndrome in are going to be watching it. There'll be children with Down syndrome who will have to go to the school playground after this has gone out. What kind of message is it sending out, and what kind of conversations or ridicule may they have to endure and have as a result of this storyline? And have Emmerdale really thought through the long-term consequences of that community?
Angela?
Well, I think I'd like to first of all say I wish soap operas would go back to the days when they were character-led and not issue-led, when the rap sheet, and it comes way before this Down syndrome storyline, we've had rape, we've had incest, we've had assisted suicide. You sometimes get the feeling that the scriptwriters are rummaging around amongst the worst sort of shades of human tragedy in order to find a way to give their characters something to do. And if you look at Coronation Street, even until the kind of early 90s, it was so character-led. It was about human drama, about divorce and relationships and everyday struggles. I think the problem is, and speaking as a mother who has been through the heart-stopping moments when I've had diagnostic testing, there's a lot of prenatal screening now. I mean, my youngest is 16, and it's become even more advanced since those days when I had those, is we have to look at how women may feel when they get those results. And I would never presume to judge anybody who wanted to keep a baby, wanted to terminate a baby. I have my own views about the right to life issue. But in terms of looking at other people, I think the fact is that there's something like 5,000 women who have abortions because of chromosomal abnormalities. Some of those may be fatal and some of them may be non-fatal. Yet you speak to parents with Down syndrome children, they are absolutely delighted and they have, a fulfilling and wonderful relationship. And the children themselves grow up to be adults who have a very, very enriched life. Okay. So it's very difficult to have a situation where you say one life is more important than another. But we have to accept that there are women who, when they get those results, will have a moment with their partner or on their own who may think, I personally cannot cope whether it's right or wrong that she feels that way. She may just not believe all the expectations she may have had about having a child, again, right or wrong.
Let's just move on if we can. Sorry, I want to thank Adam Pearson very much indeed for coming on the show, journalist and campaigner, and move to somebody else with a view on this, which is Susan Jamson, whose daughter Emma has Down syndrome. Hi, Susan, what do you think?
Well, yes, I've got a daughter who's got Down syndrome. She's now 36, and she has changed my life beyond all knowledge, recognition. I don't know what I would have done without her. Yeah, that's my Emma. However, I'm so grateful that I didn't have to make the choice. I didn't know that I was carrying a child with Down syndrome, and it was a shock when I had her, and she knows that, and it took me a week before I brought her home from the hospital because I was so shocked. So I think it's brilliant that Emmerdale are doing the story. I think it's really, really good as well that they have a child with Down syndrome that's already on the programme, so they can show the benefits and the joy you get from having a child with Down syndrome. But I couldn't demonise a couple who made the decision to abort. I don't agree with abortion. However, it's a huge thing. And we don't know what's happening in somebody's life at the time. We don't know the age of the parents. And if they worry that they're not going to outlive their child, what's going to happen? There are lots of issues. And I don't think it's a cut and dried thing. I think it is something that every person, every couple should make that decision.
And we're talking here about two characters called Laurel and Jay. And I guess it'll be a big part of the judgment here is how they have the conversation, isn't it? Because it's very important that that's handled sensitively.
Absolutely. And what they're told at the time, when I first had Emma, I didn't know anything about Down syndrome. And after I was told after an hour, the first thing they said to me was, well, she won't be academic. She won't be able to jump. She won't ever use verbs. But she's very loving and she'll love music. And I, in all my years, I don't know anybody that doesn't love music. They might like different sorts of music, but they love music. And I bought Emma a trampoline and she jumped and she speaks amazingly. She goes to a theatre company that she's gone to since she was 6 called Chicken Shed. So she performs, she acts, she talks. She's got a 2-2 degree. She's had a fantastic, she's got a boyfriend. Her life is full, is absolutely full. I wouldn't take that away from her. I'm so pleased I didn't know beforehand. But if I had have known beforehand, I might well have gone down the abortion route because of lack of knowledge. And if this programme shows that they are giving you knowledge, they are giving you, understanding what Down syndrome means and what impact it will have on your family, then that's a good thing to do.
Brilliant. Well, stay with us, Susan. We'll take some calls on this, I think. Storm, who have you got?
We're going to speak to Vicky from Devon, who has a daughter with Down syndrome, and she feels that the Emmerdale storyline could be perceived as negative.
Go on, Vicky, fire away.
I think the problem with a lot of people in the Down syndrome community is that when diagnosis is given, there's lots of negativity surrounded by it. So you're given the diagnosis, whether prenatally or postnatally, and immediately bombarded with a lot of negative information about what your child might be. And it's very hard to predict what a child might be when they're not even born. And all the information that's provided is negative. And so a lot of people choose termination because they don't have a balanced view of what life with Down syndrome might be like for them.
Do you think the programme, Vicky, has a responsibility to show that the other conversation is almost more interesting and more important, which is, all right, we're in this situation, we're going to have a child with Down syndrome, and it's brilliant, and actually that's the future's bright. Should they be showing that instead?
I don't necessarily disagree with them showing the termination storyline. What I think is lacking is that they haven't consulted with the Down syndrome community. So they've consulted with people that take them through the abortion process and support them through that, but they haven't taken them to the other side of speaking with people that would support them through the Down syndrome process, having the child and having a child with Down syndrome. And that it leads people to an automatic decision. There's in Iceland, they have 0% children born with Down syndrome now because they have all this prenatal testing, and the information that people are given is so severe that people are choosing to have abortions, and that's killing off part of society. So,
it's interesting you mention Iceland. I'd heard that I think a couple of years ago they had one child born in Iceland with Down syndrome, and I don't know whether that makes you feel sad, Susan.
Yes, it does make me feel sad. I've got two older daughters who, when they were young, we went to see somebody who'd had a baby, and one of the questions they asked was, "Oh, how old? How big? What? All sorts of things." And then they said, "Has it got Down syndrome?" And the mum said no, and they went, "Oh, what a shame." And my family feel that everyone should have one because she's her sister, she's brilliant, but it is difficult.
Yeah, and partly, Susan, I guess, because we're getting the diagnosis now is getting close to 100% now. So they're going to get to a point where and then what the Iceland situation seems to be that it's almost the logical progression is that if you know, then you have a termination, and then there aren't any children with Down syndrome at all. And that's where people say, no, wait, that's not the world we want.
No, it is sad, but it's also really hard for the person with Down syndrome. As I said, Emma is now 36, and she always has to explain that she can understand what people are saying, that she has got a voice, that she can do things, and it's a hard life for her. It is. I still think that children with Down syndrome should be born, but don't anybody think that it's going to be an easy life. It's hard with school because there are preconceived ideas, and keeping her in mainstream school, certainly for Emma, was difficult. She remained in mainstream school. And as I said, if I didn't have the theatre company, if I didn't have Chicken Shed in my life from Emma was 6, I don't know what would have happened to her. I was really lucky. I had the support of my family and I had the support of Chicken Shed. So I feel I was very lucky. I think some people don't have that support, and that's where it becomes frightening.
OK, thank you, Vicky in Devon. Storm.
We're going to speak to Angie now from Cornwall, who has a daughter with Down syndrome and thinks the storyline is insensitive.
You think it's insensitive, Angie?
I think it's incredibly insensitive. I think that to choose to terminate for Down syndrome, which isn't life-limiting, when they could have chosen Edwards or Patau's, which is direct discrimination. They have viewers with Down syndrome that are going to watch that programme. How are they going to respond to that? What message does it send to them? I think it's absolutely so insensitive and discriminatory. And also ITV proposed to have a social purpose, and they say that they use their power of their TV to shape culture for good. I don't see any shaping the culture for good here. All I see is that they're presenting a couple that discover they have a pregnancy where Down syndrome is occurred in their child, and they're going to choose to terminate. They also have alcohol problems, I believe, and they're addicts, so they possibly would have terminated anyway. But why are we focused on Down syndrome? Why is this in the conversation? Why is this used for light entertainment? We're talking about 40,000 people approximately in the country at the moment with Down syndrome. How will they feel? Will they see that message?
The Emmerdale have put this statement out, and we've referred to it, which is that they say that they have done a lot of research and...
No, they haven't done enough research. They haven't consulted. They haven't consulted the Down syndrome community. They've been to antenatal results and choices, who are the Rolls Royce if you choose to terminate your pregnancy, but they do not support people who choose to carry on. There is no NHS pathway for parents who continue their pregnancy when Down syndrome is discovered. There's a huge lack of support. There's lots of online groups that have been set up by parents to peer support, but there is very little support for parents who choose to continue.
Thanks,
we know that the numbers are so high, 90% rate, because a survey done recently showed of 1,400 women in the UK that have had a child with Down syndrome. 70% of those women were offered a termination in the same conversation that they were told their child had Down syndrome.
70%?
Something very wrong.
70, did you say?
70%.
OK, Angie, thank you very much. Storm.
We're going to speak to Byron now from Hertfordshire, who has sadly lost his son who had Down syndrome, and he thinks the storyline will help people. Oh,
so tell us why, Byron.
Hello, Jeremy, Storm, panel. I had a child back in 1992, and there was the one worry that Linda and myself had when we were together, that we'd have a Down syndrome child. Well, she was under 30 years old, so my consultant said, you can't have an amniocentesis with regards to perhaps having a Down child. So we carried on with the birth. We had a child born in Welling, Garden City, But sadly, he was born with a congenital heart condition, had to be taken to a hospital in near Rickmansworth and was operated on, and sadly passed away.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And of course, we had to go through a funeral, etc., etc., and which is very distressing for us both. And we tried again to have a child, and we've got a beautiful son now. We would have continued to look after that child that we had, not knowing he was born as a Down syndrome child, which didn't matter, really, didn't matter. And the fact is that that child had to go through an operation, and this is the key thing I want to point out, is the fact if I knew that this was going to happen, then we would have had a termination before we would have gone further with the birth.
You would have had a termination?
Yes, we would have done.
And do you think then the programme is right to show that conversation?
Oh, indeed, I do. Having had a child with Down syndrome, I think this has to go ahead, because the key thing is that we weren't offered things earlier on, back in 1992, that can be offered now, and things can be picked up with regards to any problem that the child is going to come into this world with a problem and might have to suffer for the rest of that child's life.
Thank you, Byron, very much indeed. Angela, does it worry if we're heading towards the Iceland situation where there's almost state elimination of any prospect of having a child with Down syndrome?
Well, obviously, the echoes of history warn us about eugenics and kind of weeding out the so-called less desirables in society. Not my words, by the way, but some of the awful things that have been said in the past. And listening to some of these really heartbreaking stories, you get a sense of a soap opera commoditizing a very human experience. But that's what soap operas do. But there is one point that I would like to raise, which Byron sort of, brought to the fore here. When you have a baby, there's the 20-week scan, which is pretty accurate, but can overlook an awful lot of things. It is a woman's choice how much screening she can have, to further that. Say if she's over 36 and whether she wants to have an amniocentesis, which is when they examine the fluid, the amniotic sac surrounding the baby to see whether there are signs of chromosomal abnormalities. But you've got to remember, women have to know, I keep saying women, partners have to know what to do with that information. Some people will want an informed view. Like Byron said, if I think my child's going to suffer, I don't think I could bear that. I don't think we could take it as a family. Some women will say, some parents will say, it doesn't matter. I will take this baby, whatever. This is about pro-choice. And I think that's a very, very important part of this whole conversation. And if anything, that this Emmerdale, if they're obviously going to go ahead with this storyline, and they've had fabulous publicity, crikey, they probably couldn't have dreamt of this. At least it will show, perhaps, it is agonizing. When you have information, then what do you do with it? And I had my youngest daughter over the age of 36, and I didn't have an amniocentesis because you have to know what you're going to do if you get that information.